Today, autofocus modes and accuracy of the Nikon Z9, tracking wind sports and birds in flight here on the Sea of Cortez. I'll take you through the lens of my new 100 to 400 millimeter lens on a little adventure. Well, hey everybody, it's Hudson. Welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. I'm here back in my happy place in La Ventana on the Sea of Cortez. Down here for a week, got the Nikon Z9 with my 100 to 400 millimeter lens, and I have been bloody well impressed by its action autofocus performance, both with birds in flight that fly past this clifftop home that I'm staying in and down on the water, as well as wind sports. We've got wing surfers, kite surfers, tons of action down on the water when the wind is up here. It's one of the premier kite surfing spots in North America. So I've really been able to test it, put it through its paces. I've been happy, and I've found some stuff about the autofocus that I'm excited to share with you. Before we jump in and I give you a view through the camera using different autofocus modes and talk a little bit about controls, I just want to make sure everybody knows, sign up for my office hours, February 1st. We're going to talk about cameras and gear. There'll probably be a predominant focus on Nikon, there always is, but you know, anybody shooting Sony, Fuji, Panasonic, whatever, you know, you're welcome to throw in your comments and your questions. You can sign up for that at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Join us live on Zoom or watch it on YouTube Live, and you can submit questions. We'll do a lot of Q&A, and I imagine there'll be a lot of discussion about this big beast of a Z9 that I've been having a lot of fun with here. So, you know, I will say about the Z9, it has a different method of autofocus tracking, and it's really, really good. Now, I've been long an advocate of using the auto area autofocus for the Z9, for the Nikon Z cameras, from the Z6, Z7, Z6 II, Z7 II, 50, ZFC, all of them, Z5. And that still works really, really well on this camera. They've kind of done away with that subject tracking override that I suggested everybody used and moved into a 3D tracking where you can actually indicate a point that you want to be the focus point. You can grab which subject's important to you, and it still has eye detect and face detect and body detect. And if you go into the auto, you can choose animal, people, vehicles, or an automatic combination of all of those. I find that if you're shooting birds in flight or wildlife, choosing animal makes a lot of sense. It just works a little bit better. If people are your focus, put it on people. If it's in that automatic mode, it's going to default to people, then wildlife, then vehicles, cars, boats, planes, trains. So then there's also wide area autofocus with subject tracking. So it's got face and eye detect. And that works really well too. That's a little like the group autofocus days from birds in flighting, yet you've got to kind of keep your subject around that box to lock it. So I'll talk about, those are the three modes I'd really suggest that you use. All of them work well. And I think being able to flip quickly between the three is really, really critical. I'm going to suggest that most people program this function 3 button, that if you're holding the camera in its primary position, your ring finger would come down, that lowest button down. And the reason for that is that when you flip to vertical, your middle finger is right over that button. So it's really easily accessible from either shooting position, whether you're shooting vertical or whether you're shooting horizontal. It's that bottom button there, easy to reach from either control position. And if you program that to dial in what your autofocus mode and area modes are with the front dials, you can just push that button and click, you go from automatic area autofocus to 3D to wide area. It's as easy as just pushing that button in and clicking the dial one time. So you don't even have to look up from the viewfinder. If you're tracking something way out and you're using 3D tracking and you want to flip to automatic when it becomes frame filling, just because it's a little bit easier, well, bloop, you don't even have to look away from your subject. I was doing it as birds were coming upwind towards me and flipping between modes while they're still in the air. And I'll show you some footage of that and talk you through it. I was filming it with an Adamus Ninja, so it shows you what I'm seeing in the viewfinder while I'm working. The tracking is indeed quite astounding, and the ability to use that 3D autofocus where you select a single point and you move it around. Let's say there's a group of people and you want to identify just one of them, or there's several people kite surfing towards you and you don't want the closest person that auto area would likely pick up. You want the person in the middle. Well, you just put the point over them and boop, it's going to say that's my subject, and look for their face, their eyes, their body. That's the nice thing. It still has that nuanced automatic sensor-based subject tracking. All right, everybody, I just want to throw this out there really quick. Kind of a last-minute addendum. I'm getting ready to take off to the airport and fly back home where it's cold. There's a really slick way to work with fast-moving, tough-to-track objects, to pick them up and then track them throughout the frame. You know, the wide area autofocus is great for picking up a subject coming towards you in the frame or something that's a little bit smaller. Then the 3D tracking is wonderful because it'll continue to track your subject all over the whole frame. So I'm suggesting setting up your custom settings bank and your shooting bank and say B mode as an action mode where you can just flip into it and you have actual autofocus on the shutter button. I'm actually advocating taking it off of solo back button focus, and you set your mode to where you're in wide area autofocus, wide area, AFC, so that as you touch the shutter halfway, you can acquire your subject in that wide area, kind of like group autofocus was in the DSLR age. Then the minute you've got your subject, you tap the autofocus on button and it takes that already acquired subject and turns it into a 3D tracking point that goes all over the frame and follows it. It's a dead quick, simple way to work that just feels wonderfully ergonomically. It's not what I want all the time, running around street scenes, shooting people, all that kind of stuff. It's just for birds in flight, really erratic moving action like close-up shooting the kite surfing scene that I love, or sports. It's wonderful because you can select your subject and then bap, you've suddenly got that 3D tracking point. It's super cool. I'll show you how to set that up. You know, let's go through my lens, let's look at some images, and I'll talk through these modes with you actually watching what I'm doing through the camera. All right, so some cool stuff. I'm actually going to be able to pause and play this bunch of stuff that I filmed using my Adamus Ninja 5 field recorder, looking through the Z9 and the 100 to 400 millimeter lens. And I'm going to talk about the AFC area modes, the autofocus continuous mode, action tracking area modes that I think you should think about. And that's going to be wide area, it's going to be 3D tracking, and it's going to be auto area autofocus. And I think you should play around with those modes. I'm going to show you how to switch quickly between them. So let me go through, let me talk about these modes really fast and what you can do with them. So in the beginning, I'm going to use 3D tracking. I'm using 3D tracking, autofocus continuous, and I have human subject detection. These are people out wing foiling. Wing foiling is a cool new sport. It's really, really growing fast. You don't have to have a kite. I like kiting personally, but that's all aside. So I've got my human selected. You know, when I'm shooting people, I'm gonna get better performance having people selected. When I'm shooting wildlife and birds, it's gonna be better to have wildlife selected. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm in shutter priority mode, 1250th of a second to stop the action. I'm only shooting 10 frames a second because I don't want to rack up 10,000 images shooting. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit play here. So I put that yellow box on the subject and hold down the AF on button, and I'm just tracking that person. If it can recognize a face or a head or a torso, it's going to start looking for it. There it is. It's got a face, got a head, but the kite's confusing to it. You know, it's a different weird kind of subject. So, you know, there you go. Now I noticed my friends Leor and Kristen were walking up the hill toward me. It dials in and nails them really fast. Watch this. Bam, bam, even though she's not looking. Bam, bam, right on Leor's eye. And I got perfectly sharp images of them. Now come back out, I'm gonna switch using the eye menu. I think that's the slow way. I'm gonna go into the auto area with face and eye detection and pop back out here. You know, I'm not even selecting a point. It just recognizes that I'm tracking this and that the person has a face in there. It's a lot like the Z6 II, Z7 II, Z5, Z6, Z7, Z50, ZFC. It's the mode I recommend the most in those cameras. It's very, very smart. You know, here it doesn't see a face, but it says, oh, he's tracking that. So boom, oh, there's a human. All right, so now we're gonna switch into wide area. Wide area, what you're looking for has to be in the box. It's still got face and eye and torso detection, but it's looking for things just in that box. Very, very powerful, you know, boom, the minute it sees a face in there, it starts locking it. If it sees eyes, it locks it. All right, let's look at birds. Now I wanna make note really quick. I'm in my faster mode, 20 frames a second raw, shutter priority, 400th of a second, it's getting low light. But I'm in 3D tracking here. I gotta put the box on the bird, which is hard with a fast moving bird. These are not the fastest of moving birds, so it's a little bit easier. But I've got the wrong subject detection here. I'm doing too many things with the Ninja, everything else. I don't have animal on, so it's not going to track its face and its head as well as it would as if it's looking for a person, not an animal. So you'll see it does okay. But what I really want to show you here is how I can switch really quickly using that function 3 button. Like I said, it's under my ring finger when I'm in horizontal, holding onto the camera sort of traditionally. If I flip to the vertical grip, it's right under my middle finger when I'm shooting with the vertical grip, and I can just press that button and click that index finger wheel, that secondary command wheel out front of the camera, whether it's in the vertical grip or the horizontal grip, and it'll flip between what area mode. If I turn the main command dial with my thumb, it would change AFC to AFS to manual focus. With the front dial, it changes 3D to auto area to wide area. And I'm going to show you how to limit it so that it doesn't go into the old legacy mode dynamic that's not nearly as good as those modes. All right, so here we go. Here's my bird. I get that point on it, boom. You know, it's not noticing that it's an animal because I'm in human mode. But if I want to switch, I just hit that button with my ring finger, and you'll see these highlight yellow when I do that. And I'll switch right now into wide area. Now I have to keep it in the box. And if I want to switch again to 3D, boom, it's as quick as hitting that button and turning the dial. You see how fast? I'm not even losing the bird while I'm doing it. I don't have to look away or even think. All right, now here's what happens when you actually have the animal detect on. It starts catching its eye. Now, you know, is it important to make sure you have people on when you're shooting people? Yeah, it's not even picking up my friend Miguel. But you put people detect and boom, it tracks an eye. And here's something cool. You go into that 3D mode, I can move my 3D track over and choose which of these two people I want to find the eye of. I love how 3D still has face and eye detect. So I just take my 3D point, move it over to Kristen from John, and boom, now it's looking for her eye instead. I can say this is the person that matters. Okay, so, all right, we've talked about sort of the 3 basic modes. Now I want to talk about this way to set up a hybrid mode where you use the wide area to pick up a fast moving subject, like frame filling sports, where you really have, you know, the people filling the frame as you're shooting, or birds in flight where they're moving radically and fast and it's hard to get that little 3D tracking point that tracks all over the frame on your subject. Instead, I'm going to have you set it up so that when you have it, when you're not pressing the AF on button, you're in wide area mode and the shutter locks a subject within that wide area box. But the minute you press and hold the AF on button, it converts that subject into a 3D tracking subject that it'll follow all over the frame. It's really intuitive, it's really easy. I'm going to show you how it works looking through the viewfinder, then I'm going to show you how to set it up in your camera. And this is not my complete setup guide to the Z9, this is just a little kind of Easter egg, a gimme treat in advance of that coming out. But this is a really cool mode and I'll show you how to set it up and how it works. All right. So as I said, when I don't have the AF on button, I just have the wide area. The minute I hit the shutter, it picks up that, oh, there's a person in there. This is a guy getting a wing foiling lesson. He's behind a boat and he's learning how to get up on the wing. But if I take him outside that box, it loses him. I have to have him inside the box. If I hit the back button, because I'm in this hybrid mode, it converts that already picked up subject that I picked up with a half press of the shutter button into a 3D tracking point. Just by pressing the 3D tracking button. Now all of a sudden it's not a shutter focus, it's a back button focus in 3D tracking mode. And I'll show you how to set this up in the menus. But now all of a sudden we're following him. He stands up, it even recognizes he has a head, right? If I want to switch from him to another subject or the boat, all I have to do is let off the AF on button, I go back to the wide area and I move that over what I want to pick up. I do that in a second here. I'm tracking him for a while. This is tough conditions too. Backlit, silhouette, the sun's behind them early in the morning. Crazy before the wind comes up. All right, so at some point I switch here. I let off, boom. Now I'm on the people in the boat. I let off, boom, I'm back on him. That easy. Tracks him right across our windsock at our house up on the cliff. All right, it's even tracking him as I zoom. So all I do is let off and I get the wide area, pick up my subject with the shutter, convert it with the back button to 3D, and it can go anywhere outside the box. It's a great mode. Let's talk about how to set it up. All right, so I'm gonna have you set it up using the settings banks. Okay, so there are settings banks in your custom settings menu, the pencil, and in your shooting bank. These are banks, okay? There's A, B, C, and D. I leave my A bank as standard. I'm using B as action. This is all gonna be in my setup video, But banks are a little like the user 1, user 2, user 3 menus that are modes that are on the dials of a lot of the prosumer cameras and the Z6 and the Z7s of the world. But it's a little bit different. It's just if you go into the B bank and you start changing settings, it's going to remember what you did in the B bank. You go back to the A bank, it's right where you left off when you were in the A bank. And it has these banks, it's a little confusing. It has them for the shooting menu. It has them for the custom settings menu. It gets even more complicated in video. We're not going to go there right now. We don't need to get into calculus here. But we're going to stick with, I'm going to set up my B as action. And I can even name it with a right press on the D-pad. It's going to say, do you want to rename this? And I can rename it. You can even touch the screen to do this. Action, okay? Now, I'm in action. All I have to do is press OK or touch the back screen here, OK, and I'm in that B mode. I want to change my shooting mode from, it was in program. It's all kind of how the camera comes out of the box in each of those modes. You need to set all the settings that you want to set for each of those banks. Each one's going to be like a blank slate that you set up how you want. It's like setting up the camera for the first time in each bank in each menu. So we're going to go into shutter priority. That way it'll remember you were in shutter priority in that bank. And then we're going to set up some settings. All right. We're going to go into focus mode and choose AFC. We're going to go to area mode. And what do we pick? Wide. We're going into wide area mode. All right. Now we want to pick our subject detection as animal. I'm going to go animal because I was probably shooting birds. I'm going into the custom settings. Custom settings have a bank too. I'm skipping over it, but B is already set up as action. If I push to the right, you'd see A was standard, B is action. I'm choosing B. So B for me is action, both in the shooting menu and in the custom settings menus banks. All right, so remember, if we go back to shooting street or just people or walking around town, I'm probably going to go back into A, which is a completely different set of settings where my shutter has nothing to do with focus whatsoever. This is just for the fast moving action where I really like this mode that's hybrid between the shutter and the back button with wide area and 3D tracking. So let's talk about the second part of how to set this up in the custom settings menu. There's several things we're going to do in focus and then in controls. All right, let's go. So in focus, we're going to go down to AF activation, make sure it's shutter, AF on. All right, that's weird for me to say. Focus point persistence, we want on auto. That's going to let you hand that point off. We're going to go into limit area mode selection. This is something I'm just showing you because it'll make it quicker when you're using that function 3 button and flipping the little dial to go between wide area autofocus and auto area and 3D tracking. Turn off all these legacy mode dynamic area. You don't need dynamic area with the Z9 or the Z cameras. It's just not as good in my book as the other modes. So turn those off. You just push to the right, undo them, and then hit done. And suddenly those won't be options as you're flipping through. So into the we're going to go into the controls now. And custom controls, we want to go to the AF on button. This is the most important part. And we're going to say we want it to be, we're going to scroll down through the options, and it's up near the top, AF area mode plus AF on. So it's choosing the mode and hitting it. And I want that to be what? 3D tracking. So now we're set. Now when I'm out there without pressing that back button, let me back up and show you which button. Without pressing this button that converts me to 3D and presses it, I'm in wide area with the shutter activation, right? But the minute, even when I have the shutter halfway down, that I hit and hold that 3D tracking button, it's going to automatically convert the point. So in the beginning of my shoot, I'm not hitting the AF on at all. This is all shutter. I can lock the guy on his little foil board. We saw this before. I've locked him by hitting it. It turned yellow. When he goes outside the box, I'll lose him. But if I put him back in, lock him, and then hit the back button like I just did, now it's a 3D tracking point that can go anywhere in the frame. And it's looking for faces, it's looking for eyes. Just make sure you have the correct subject chosen. Remember, it's going to be people for people, animals for animals. If you use the auto subject detection method, it looks for people first, then animals, then vehicles. I like to, if I know what I'm shooting, I like to choose the right one. All right, fun stuff. Okay, so we've looked at settings, we've looked through the lens. Let's have a look at some of the results. I'm going to show you some action shots. I'm going to show you some of my favorite shots from the trip. I'm also going to show you some shots that my friend Jasmine took, who hasn't touched a Nikon in a lot of years and whose only camera that she uses is a Canon 5D Mark II, and I'll show you what she was able to get with just me showing her a couple button presses. So you can see all the images we're running through, Nikon Z9, all with the 100 to 400 or one of the teleconverters, all raw files except there's one HDR blend I'll walk through. You know, these images are of a turn, and before we jump in and start talking a ton about these images of the turn, let me just show you that the turn is not a bird that moves in a slow and predictable way. There's a lot of crazy motion going on. I'm going to show you like 52 images of it, I think, and they're all basically taken in, you know, a 10-second period, just tapping the shutter here and there where it's interesting at 20 frames a second. So that gives you a little idea what the turn looks like in its motion. All right, so, you know, as we run through, I mean, it's just the tracking, using that wide area, converting it to 3D tracking like we talked about, and it's just, it's a new kind of level, you know. You know, you zoom in on any of these, they don't disappoint. You know, there might be one or two where it's got the wrong part of the bird, but you know, that's 52 images we just ran through. They're really, really stunning. All right, so now I'm going to show you this just amazing young wing foiler. And I'll show you some shots of him. He's 15 years old. He's sponsored and kind of on this special track for athletes. You know, here's what wing foiling looks like. It's not as erratic as the turn, but things happen really, really fast, you know. Not so much just your standard stuff, but the things that this kid does, they happen quick. So, you know, let's have a look through the Z9 and the 100 to 400 at what some of that stuff looks like. Again, 20 frames a second as he's ripping out there, and you know, it's just nuts. That one, I think I edited a little bit. It's just, you know, let me go back to the one. Oh, I was spinning my little wheel there. There's the one I edited a little bit. Just crazy fun. You know, his face is turned away, so it's locked more on the board and the foil. But holy crap, you know. Plus, I think I'm shooting it, well, 1/1250th of a second. That's kind of my birds and sports action freezing threshold. Just crazy cool, right? I mean, you saw how quick that happens, and look at what you can get with 20 frames. You find sort of that definitive shot. Super cool. All right, so let's just run through and talk about, I love the versatility of this 100 to 400. It's starting to make me think that my most frequently carried kit might wind up being the 24 to 120, the 100 to 400, and the 14 to 24, you know, along with some primes like my new favorite little 28 2.8, my 50 1.8, my 105 1.4 F mount might become my only F mount. Here's my friend Leor walking up the beach. I detect, bam, you know, in that sort of standard shooting mode. My buddy John Wilbur, all stoked to be in Baja. Birds in flight, you know, you don't have to even be clicking to see whether it's sharp and in focus. It's just nailing them as they rip through. I love these frigate birds that are out in Baja flying around. They're a pelagic bird. They go long distances and they harass other birds by bothering them till they throw up and then steal the vomit. Kind of a disgusting behavior, but a really fascinating dinosaur-like bird. We got lots of buzzards flying around. You know, here's some more fun shots of my little friend Christopher just tearing it up. It's fun to just be able to nail those shots. You know, and the only, you know, I took the Z9 down there. We had some beautiful sunrises right out of the house. There's a lighthouse out on this point way in the distance. And playing around with it, I was really impressed with the dynamic range and it's just quality, not to mention the 100 to 400. You know, let's open this up so you can see what some of the focal ranges are in these. I did a little cropping there, a little bit of adjustment on some of these images just to bring out the color, but no HDR in this. You know, and then I was kind of shocked when I was just shooting the sun, you know, and I shot it on the meter and it protected the highlights enough to be able to save them. You know, you got a really dark image, but I'm blown away. At 400 millimeters, this lens is not ghosting or flaring, shooting straight into the sunrise. Nice and sharp, wide open. Here's 400 f5.6. Beautiful color rendition out of this camera, just gorgeous. You know, we did have some beautiful sunrises, lots of interest in the sky. You know, and shooting that sunrise, you know, here I just decided after I was looking through the images, let's test this thing out. And, you know, sneak alert, the 24-120 does just as well shooting into the sun. It's pretty crazy. You know, here's at 100 millimeters. Here's at 400 millimeters. I mean, wow. Here is an HDR blend. I shot, this one's on the meter. This is 3 stops underexposed. This is 3 stops overexposed, and blended those 3 into this one. Wow. I mean, there is no ghosting and flare. They've really done a magnificent, magnificent job for a zoom 100 to 400. I'm a bit blown away. Shooting some things, this is with the teleconverter. There are some shots with teleconverters that I was out there shooting. And this is just straight up the 100 to 400 at 400. This is this guy and either his wife or his girlfriend. He's teaching to hydrofoil, an electric hydrofoil. Those things are out like $13,000, outrageously expensive. I think some people saw Mark Zuckerberg out riding one. Well, he's got his dog and he's teaching. And here it is with the 1.4 teleconverter. Wow, you know, the focus was not hard. I'll have a whole ATS about using teleconverters, the 1.4 and the 2.0 with the 100 to 400, and touch on the 70 to 200 as well. Here's the 2.0, you know, maybe a little step down and a little slower focusing, but it's pretty darn good. I mean, here's 400 millimeters, here's 800 millimeters with the teleconverter, wide open at f11. Pretty amazing. Now let's talk about Jasmine. Jasmine is a rock star out on her twin tip or her surfboard, kite surfing and kiteboarding, and also is learning to hydrofoil. I handed her the camera. I know Jasmine's a photographer. I know she loves photography, but I haven't looked through her eye as much. She's never been on a workshop with me. She's more my kite surfing friend. And I handed her the camera and I showed her, you know, here's how you do the focus trick. And then I went out kiting, and let's just show you some of the things Jasmine captured. And then I'll let her tell you sort of her experience with the camera. I shot her with the GoPro a little bit. My friend Kristen, this is Jasmine's boyfriend Miguel, who came down with us, launching my kite for me going out with my hydrofoil, Kristen getting ready to take off with her twin tip, Kristen's husband Leor, they're both great friends of mine. Miguel lining out his kite, Kristen launching her kite, Leor handing her a board and running to help someone else. My buddy John Wilbur, he and his wife Donnie were down there too, giving the thumbs up just for being in Baja. These are all Jasmine shots in like the hour that I was out riding. Leor's got his GoPro mounted up, taking off. Miguel launching John Wilbur's kite, Leor in the water taking off. I love her eye. I love the way she's framing things. John Wilbur headed out. There's me coming back in. I actually went out and thought my 10-meter kite was too big, so I came back in and I got an 8-meter kite. Miguel getting ready to launch his kite, me coming in. I mean, yeah, she's nailing it, and her eye is so cool. It's not just how quickly she adapts to using this camera and its autofocus, but she did a really nice artistic job. Here's, you know, just a nice guy on the beach that landed my kite for me. There goes Miguel riding out. Here's just the sea of kites, downwind, people out wing foiling and kite surfing. Me putting my little 8-meter behind my 10-meter and switching the lines around with my foil holding it all down, getting ready to take back off, getting ready to launch my kite, headed back out. Miguel coming in. Then she noticed Christopher doing all of his tricks, and she got what I think is, well, there's Miguel riding in. I think she got some of the best shots of Christopher of the day. He was in close doing things. There's me ripping through on my hydrofoil. Fun shot. This is Christopher's father, Chris, riding back out. Maybe not perfectly in focus, but you know, you don't get every single shot. But there's Christopher and his dad. These are really fun. I mean, me coming out of the water, happy. It's fun to get pictures of yourself for once. Thank you, Jasmine. The two of them, Miguel coming in. Look at these shots of Christopher up above his dad. Miguel, and then she's got kind of this glory sequence that I just love. I mean, that is a ridiculous image. You know, the 100 to 400, first off, holy cow, what a fun lens, what range, what sharpness. This is wide open again at f5.6, you can see. And then Jasmine, you know, I mean, for never having shot this camera before, rock star Jasmine. I'll have her talk to you really quick about the experience. So Jasmine.
Yes, hi Hudson.
You've never shot a mirrorless camera before?
Never.
Never. Mm-hmm. And what camera do you normally shoot with?
I have a Canon 5D Mark II.
And you had how much fun with the Z9? What'd you think of it?
Oh my god, it is amazing. So much fun, so fast.
And you were getting awesome shots, just like handing it to you and leaving you alone with it.
Yes, I've never used it before. You told me what button to push, pretty much. Very, very awesome, amazing. I want one.
Well, you are a rocking photographer. You really have a great eye.
Star.
It was fun. All right, let's go kite.
Okay.
Well, all right, everybody. I hope that that made sense to everyone. Again, I'm going to be doing a full setup video for this Z9 camera where I walk through all the controls and the menus. So look out for that. It'll be posting relatively soon. I'm going to do another video kind of comparing performance of this lens with a 2.0 teleconverter versus a 1.4 teleconverter, both on autofocus performance and image quality. We'll go through, I'll show you the view again through the camera as I'm using those and how the autofocus performance compares, and then we'll look at image quality on the computer. So look for that video coming very soon. And I've got another video about why I think this camera is amazing for action, but really has some shortcomings for landscape. That's a bummer, given its high megapixel count. And then there'll be another video coming in the not too distant future about its video capabilities, which are vast and impressive. All right. So remember, everybody, I've got links to everything that I talk about in this video's description, as well as at hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. Please join those office hours. We're going to be talking a lot about this camera and other Nikons and Sonys and you name it. That's fun to get together in the group. February 1st, 10 a.m. Pacific. Sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. You can also watch it on YouTube Live or see it archived on YouTube. And I hope everyone out there is staying safe, having fun, and being creative. All right, we'll see you next week.